Hey team, this is Brian from SongAid, and today's lesson is a songwriting block on scale degrees, which can help you better understand and communicate about music. Let's get into it. There are some prerequisites to this lesson. Number one, you have to know your basic major and minor scales and chords. Number two, you have to know the chords within those keys. So in other words, if I'm in G major, I know that the chords G and A minor, D, E minor, and others all apply. If you're not clear on those, I would learn that stuff first, and you can find that in SongAid's database or elsewhere on the internet. If you feel really confident in those areas, this lesson is for you. Let's continue. Scale degrees are when we apply numbers to a scale rather than notes. We still know the notes, but we're going to use the numbers to analyze music, understand it, and communicate about it. Let's take two examples. So if I know my G major scale, I might think of it like this: G, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, G. With scale degrees, it's even easier. If I know the pattern, I can simply count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Now, the last note could be an 8 or it could be a 1. It kind of all depends on the context. And the reason it could be either one is because it's a G again, so the scale has started over. So we're either finished playing it or we're going to keep playing it. And that's kind of the context I was talking about. If you're done, you can call it an 8. If you're not done, call it a 1. Let's take a minor example just to illustrate this even further. So if I play a D minor scale, I'm just going to think in numbers again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, or 1. Now, how does this apply to songwriting? Well, it applies in a few ways. Number one, melody. When a singer does what they do and sings, they're moving around the notes of a scale, or they're using scale degrees. And this really helps us analyze, understand, and communicate about the melody. Let's take an example, Free Fallin' by Tom Petty, which I'll play in the key of E. She's a good girl, loves her mama, loves Jesus, and her boyfriend too. If I look at the notes of that melody, if you watched closely, I really only used 3 notes. And in the key of E major, 1, 2, 3. The verse of Free Fallin' is made up of just 3 notes. This is really useful information. Now, scale degrees helped me analyze that and understand it and communicate to you about it. What I can do now is, if I'm writing a song in a major key, I can consider the notes 1, 2, and 3 for my own melody. Of course, I'm going to use it in my own unique way so as not to copy any artist, but this is really useful information. Another way scale degrees are useful is helping us understand intervals. Intervals are essentially just the distance between 2 notes. Often in music, we'll encounter things like melodic jumps or falls, I guess you could call them, which is where a melody might go from an E all the way up to a C sharp, a note much higher, or it could go from an E down to a G sharp, much lower. These distances are intervals, and our scale degrees can help us name those intervals. For instance, the first one I played is a 6th. Why is it a 6th? Well, start counting from E and count up to the C sharp. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. See, if I know my scale pattern and I understand scale degrees, I can very easily count that distance and name the interval. Let's take the second example, E down to G sharp. Okay? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. that is also a sixth, even though it's different notes. Intervals are also heavily involved in writing harmony parts, which as a songwriter, you may be interested in doing. You may want to embellish your beautifully written melody with some beautiful harmony. But before we get ahead of ourselves, SongAid has a whole songwriting block lesson on intervals, which I encourage you to check out after this lesson. The third way scale degrees are useful in songwriting is with chord progressions. So like I said, a prerequisite to this lesson is you know the chords within a key. Let's take G again. So we've got G, A, B minor, C, D, E minor. Those are basically the main chords of that key. Now, if I were playing a song like this one, I could very easily determine what the chord progression is simply by counting off the scale degrees. The first chord I played was a G, and the second chord was a C. So I can simply count 1, 2, 3, 4. My 1 chord is a G, and my 4 chord is a C. That is a 1-4 chord progression. Let's take another example, like Knockin' on Heaven's Door. It's in the key of G. And let's stop there. So there's 3 chords. I know it's a G, a D, and an A. And knowing my scale degrees, I know the first chord is a 1, the second chord is a 5, and the third chord is a 2. So that is a 1-5-2. And you see, I'm already speaking more fluently using scale degrees. One thing to note about chord progressions and scale degrees is that chord progressions are written using Roman numerals, whereas if we're analyzing a melody or an interval, we would probably just use the numbers. So now you should be feeling pretty comfortable with the chords of a key and how to assign a scale degree to each chord. One thing you might encounter when you're playing your own songs or songs on the radio are inversions. Up until now, we've been playing very basic chords, but more advanced chords do exist, and they're called inversions. We'll learn about these in another lesson, but I'm mentioning them simply for your awareness. And those aware of inversions may be wondering how we apply scale degrees to them. It's a little bit different, and I will go over that in the inversions lesson, which is available now on the SongAid YouTube channel. So let's talk about your homework. Number 1, if you're not fully comfortable with intervals and inversions, go watch those songwriting block lessons now. If you're feeling comfortable with those concepts already, it's time to get your hands dirty and take what we learned in this lesson and apply it. Play some of your favorite songs, whether it's your own stuff or stuff you hear on the radio, and write out the chord progressions. Focus on the verse and the chorus of the songs, and take it in small bites. Don't try to learn the entire verse. Just take a short section, map out the chords, and work out what scale degrees associate with those chords, and then write down what the chord progression is in Roman numerals. Thanks for joining me today. We learned about scale degrees, which is where you assign the notes of a scale numbers. This is applicable to songwriting in a number of ways, including understanding melody, intervals, and especially chord progressions. Scale degrees are a great way to simplify music theory and analyze, understand, and communicate about music. I'll be using scale degrees frequently in our SongAid lessons, so make sure you get comfortable with this concept. Hope that was useful. Thanks for joining me, and I'll see you in the next one.